After gambling away his entire wedding fund, a desperate son makes a shocking decision. He forges his mother's signature to sell her house from under her. He thinks he's just a few signatures away from solving his problems. He has no idea his mother's bank has a strict policy of verbal confirmation, and the phone call that's about to blow his life apart is on its way. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here for another story. Before we get into this incredible story of betrayal, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing, and clicking the notification bell. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The numbers on the bank statement seemed to glow. For 10 years, I had been diligently putting money aside into a special savings account, a secret wedding gift for my only son, Leo. It was my dream to hand him and his fiancée, Chloe, a check that would allow them to start their married life without the crushing weight of debt. The final sum was significant, enough for a down payment on a beautiful house or the lavish wedding Chloe had always dreamed of. I folded the statement, placed it in the envelope with the cashier's check I'd had drawn up, and felt a wave of pure maternal joy. All those years of quiet saving were about to culminate in the most wonderful surprise. Leo came over for dinner that night. I was hoping to find the right moment to give him the envelope, but he was off. He seemed agitated, his leg bouncing under the table, his eyes constantly darting around the room. I attributed it to pre-wedding jitters. "Everything all right, honey?" I asked as we cleared the plates. Yeah, just stressed," he mumbled. "So much paperwork with the wedding and all." He then asked a strange question. "Mom, where do you keep all your important documents? You know, like the deed to the house, bank stuff. You should really have it all in one safe place. I could help you organize it sometime." I was touched by his sudden concern for my affairs. "That's sweet of you, dear," I said, "but it's all safe in the top drawer of my filing cabinet in the study." I showed him the drawer, never for a moment suspecting the true nature of his interest. A few days passed. The strange feeling lingered, but I pushed it away. He was my son, after all. I trusted him implicitly. I decided I would give him the check at their engagement party that weekend, a perfect public moment to share my joy. I was in my garden on a bright Thursday afternoon, planning which roses to cut for the party centerpiece, when the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Hello? Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mrs. Grace Miller?" A polite professional voice asked. "Yes, this is she," I replied, pruning a stray branch from my prize-winning Julia Child rosebush. "Wonderful," the man said. "My name is Paul from the Title Verification Department at County National Bank. I'm calling today as a final security measure to verbally confirm your authorization for the expedited sale of the property located at 455 Rosewood Lane." I froze, the pruning shears still in my hand. 455 Rosewood Lane. That was my address, my house. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. The the sale of my property?" "Yes, ma'am," the man said cheerfully, completely oblivious to the world that was collapsing around me. "We received the signed transfer of title documents this morning from the realtor your son, Mr. Leo Miller, is working with. It's a cash offer, closing tomorrow. Very exciting. We just need your final verbal confirmation before we process the transfer." I stared blankly at my beautiful roses, the ones I had nurtured for 20 years. My son. My son was selling my house. He had taken my trust, my love, my home, and was trying to turn it into cash for a wedding. The pain was so sharp, so stunning, it was a physical blow. But through the pain, a cold, hard clarity began to emerge. My son had just made a very, very big mistake. And this polite man on the phone had just handed me all the power in the world. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Sir," I said, my voice now calm and clear as a bell, "thank you for calling to verify. There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding. I have not authorized the sale of my property." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "In fact, I believe what you have on your desk is evidence of a crime." I've only just begun this story, but believe me, it's about to get even more intense. Stay tuned to find out what happens when the hero faces an even greater injustice. The silence on the other end of the line was a testament to the chaos I had just unleashed. The cheerful bank employee who had just been trying to complete a routine verification was now a party to a potential felony. "Ma'am," he finally stammered, his professional demeanor gone, "did you say a crime?" "That's correct," I said, my voice as cold and hard as a diamond. "The signature on those documents is a forgery. My son does not have the authority to sell my property. I would advise you to freeze this transaction immediately and cooperate fully with the authorities, who will be in touch shortly." Before he could respond, I hung up. I then made my second call to my lawyer, Mr. Chen. I explained the situation, and he, with a voice simmering with a calm, legal fury, told me he would handle everything. I knew my son, Leo, would not find out about my discovery immediately. The bank wouldn't call him to tell him the deal was off. They would simply freeze the transaction and wait for legal guidance. No, the first sign of trouble for Leo would be something far more mundane. It would be the realtor calling him, asking why the bank had suddenly put an indefinite hold on the sale. I pictured my son's confusion, his annoyance, his arrogant assumption that it was just some small bureaucratic snag. He would have no idea that the foundation of his desperate plan had just been demolished. He would be living in a fool's paradise for a few more hours, completely unaware that his life was about to be systematically taken apart. The next move was mine. I had the element of surprise. He thought I was oblivious, puttering in my garden. He had no idea I was now a woman on a warpath. Mr. Chen had advised me to stay away from the house to let the legal process work, but I couldn't. I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eye after what he had tried to do. I drove to his fiancée Chloe's apartment, the place they were supposed to be leaving after their lavish wedding. I didn't call first. I just showed up. When Chloe opened the door, her face, which was usually a mask of smug satisfaction, was pale and worried. "Grace," she said, surprised, "what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Where is he, Chloe?" I asked, my voice calm. "Where is my son?" She led me into her beautifully decorated living room. Leo was on the phone, his back to me, talking in a hushed, angry tone. "What do you mean, on hold?" he was saying. "It's a cash offer. Just push it through." He was talking to the realtor. He still didn't know. He hung up the phone and turned, a frustrated scowl on his face. When he saw me, he froze. "Mom," he said, his voice a mixture of shock and irritation, "what are you doing here?" I didn't answer him right away. I just looked at him, letting the silence stretch. I looked at this child I had raised, this man who had smiled at me over dinner while planning to sell my home out from under me. "I had a very interesting phone call today, Leo," I said finally, "from my bank. They were calling to congratulate me on the sale of my house, the sale you authorized by forging my name." The color drained from his face. His carefully constructed world of lies and desperation collapsed in a single, silent moment. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. Chloe let out a small, horrified gasp. "Forge?" she whispered, looking at her fiancé with new eyes. "Leo, what did you do?" He couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at me. He just stared at the expensive rug beneath his feet. A man suddenly trapped in the wreckage of his own deceit. The secret was out, and the consequences were just beginning. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick with a toxic mixture of shock, guilt, and dawning terror. Chloe was the first to break, her horrified gaze snapping from my face to her fiancé's. "Forgery," she whispered, the word sounding alien in her pristine living room. "Leo, what is she talking about?" My son, my dear deceitful son, attempted to bluff. He produced a short, barking laugh that held no humor. "Mom, you're being dramatic," he said, trying for a tone of wounded innocence. It wasn't a sale. I was just getting an appraisal. The realtor needed a signature to get the paperwork started. I was going to talk to you about it. The lie was so pathetic, so transparently desperate. It was almost sad. Before I could even respond, Chloe turned on him. An appraisal? She shrieked, her voice rising with hysteria. You told me she had agreed to sell. You told me the money would be in our account by next week. You told me my wedding was paid for. The accusation hung in the air, and in that moment, the web of his deceit unraveled completely. He hadn't just lied to me, he had lied to the woman he was about to marry. He had promised her a future funded by a crime he hadn't yet managed to commit. It's a bit beyond an appraisal when you forge a signature on a federal banking document and a state title transfer, Leo, I said, my voice as cold and quiet as a winter morning. The bank has a copy. My lawyer, Mr. Chen, has a copy. They call it a felony. The word felony landed in the room with a dead, heavy thud. The fight went out of my son completely. His shoulders slumped, he sank onto his fiancée's expensive white sofa, his head in his hands. The truth, ugly and sordid, finally pouring out. He told us everything. He hadn't been planning the wedding. He was at the casino. The money they had saved, the money Chloe's parents had contributed, the money he had promised was in a high-yield savings account, it was all gone. He had lost it over the course of a single, disastrous weekend of blackjack and bad bets. He was deep in debt to the casino, and the wedding caterers were demanding their final payment. Selling my house wasn't just a way to fund a lavish wedding, it was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to cover his tracks before his fiancée found out he was a broke, gambling addict. I watched Chloe's face as she listened to his pathetic confession. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion and then to a look of pure, unadulterated revulsion. The man she was going to marry wasn't the powerful, successful go-getter he pretended to be. He was a liar, a gambler, and a thief who had been seconds away from making her an accomplice to his crime. She looked at him, then at me, and I could see the dawning horror in her eyes as she realized the full scope of the disaster. She had hitched her wagon to a falling star. I had seen enough. I had the truth, in all its ugly glory. I stood up, my purse in my hand. I looked down at my son, who was still hiding his face in his hands. So, I said, you didn't just try to steal my home. You did it to cover up a gambling addiction that you hid from your fiancé. This is much worse than I thought. I turned and walked to the door. Chloe was frozen on the sofa, staring into space. Leo was weeping quietly. Their perfect life, their perfect wedding, their perfect future. It was all a fantasy built on my money and his lies, and it had all just gone up in smoke. My lawyer will be in touch with his terms. I suggest you both find lawyers of your own. It seems you're going to need them. We are on the verge of the climax. What happens now will turn everything upside down. You simply cannot miss the resolution of this story. I let the silence hang in the air of my lawyer's office for a long moment. My son, Leo, and his fiancée, Chloe, sat across from me, their faces a mixture of terror and disbelief. The bravado was gone. The entitlement had vanished. All that was left were two spoiled children who had just been caught trying to commit a felony. Mr. Chen, my lawyer, sat beside me, his expression impassive, though I could see a glint of steel in his eyes. He had the paperwork ready. He had already outlined the potential criminal charges: bank fraud, forgery, attempted grand larceny. The threat of jail time was very, very real. So, I began, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of all the power in the room. Here is the situation as I see it. You, my son, have a gambling problem. You, Chloe, have a spending problem. And together, you have a character problem. You were willing to steal my home, the only thing I have left from your father, to fund a wedding and cover your reckless behavior. I looked at Chloe. And you, dear, were so eager to believe his lies. You never once questioned where the money was coming from. You just saw the dollar signs. Chloe flinched and looked down at her hands. Leo finally found his voice. Mom, we're sorry, he stammered. I know it's not enough, but we'll do anything. Please, don't call the police. His plea was pathetic, but for the first time, it felt genuine. The terror of real consequences had finally pierced his thick skull of arrogance. I looked at this man-child I had raised, and I felt not anger, but a profound sense of pity and a heavy responsibility. Sending him to jail would be easy, but what would it solve? It would only confirm his failure. It would not teach him how to be a man. I had spent the last 2 days thinking about this, about the crossroads we were at. I could destroy him, or I could try to rebuild him. I chose the harder path. I will not be calling the police today, Leo, I said. A wave of relief so powerful it was visible washed over both of them. But, I continued, and their faces tensed again, my silence comes with conditions, non-negotiable conditions. I slid a document across the table that Mr. Chen had drafted. First, the wedding is off, indefinitely. You two are in no position to get married. You will inform your guests and your parents immediately. Second, I went on, you will both enter into financial counseling and, for you, Leo, a certified gambling addiction program. I will choose the therapists. You will attend every session, or this deal is off. Third, you will get a second job, Leo, something humble, working nights or weekends. Every penny you earn will go towards paying back the debt you owe the casino and your wedding vendors. I will not give you a single dollar. I saved the final condition for last. And finally, you will both volunteer every Saturday for the next year at the community soup kitchen where I work. You will see what real struggle looks like. You will learn some humility. They stared at the document, at the list of demands. It was a complete dismantling of their comfortable, entitled lives. It was a sentence of hard labor, of public accountability, and of forced introspection. It was, I thought, incredibly merciful. I stood up. Mr. Chen has the paperwork for you to sign, agreeing to these terms. If you sign it, I will instruct the bank that the matter is resolved and I will not press charges. I walked to the door of the conference room. The choice is yours. You can either sign that paper and begin the long, hard road of earning back your self-respect, or you can take your chances with the district attorney. I suggest you choose wisely. We are on the verge of the climax. What happens now will turn everything upside down. You simply cannot miss the resolution of this story. The year that followed was one of quiet, brutal consequence. My son, Leo, and his now fiancée in limbo, Chloe, signed the agreement. The lavish wedding was canceled, replaced by the stark reality of their new lives. Leo, the man who had bragged about his financial prowess, took a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Chloe, who had dreamed of a life of leisure, had to find a job as a waitress to help cover their rent. Their weekends were no longer spent at trendy restaurants. They were spent ladling soup and washing dishes at the downtown shelter. I watched them from a distance. I attended the family counseling sessions, where I saw their arrogance slowly, painfully being chipped away by the hard reality of their situation. I saw my son, for the first time, take true responsibility for his weakness. I saw Chloe, for the first time, confront the ugly, entitled person she had become. They were repaying the loan for my bail money in small, monthly increments, each payment a humbling reminder of the night their perfect world collapsed. The biggest change was in their relationship with me. There were no grand apologies, no dramatic scenes. Instead, there was a new, quiet respect. They would call, not to ask for anything, but just to check in. They would ask about my garden. They would tell me about a funny customer at the restaurant or a difficult night at the grocery store. They were talking to me not as a bank, but as a mother. They were rebuilding the bridge they had so carelessly burned, one small, tentative step at a time. On the 1-year anniversary of that fateful night, they invited me to dinner. Not at a fancy restaurant, but at their small, cramped apartment. They had cooked the meal themselves. It was a simple pot roast, the same meal I had been preparing for them on the night of my birthday. After we ate, Leo handed me a small, simple envelope. Inside was the final payment for the $5,000 loan and a handwritten note. Mom, it read, "This is the last payment on the debt we owe you, but we know the real debt can never be repaid. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for teaching us the hardest, most necessary lesson of our lives." I looked at them, at this new, humbled, and more honest version of my family, and the last of the deep, cold anger in my heart finally melted away. They had been forced to lose everything to finally understand what was truly important. They had paid their dues, not just financially, but emotionally. "I think," I said, a small, genuine smile on my face, "that it's time we started having Sunday dinners again." The look of pure, unadulterated relief and joy on their faces was all the repayment I would ever need.